Hey, I am Chris Bone from Disintegrator Films, and real quick we're going to walk you through how to create an animation like this using After Effects and Illustrator and a couple of free assets from freepik.com. So at freepik.com, pretty cool place to find little stuff to animate. I found that this technique has helped me at work a whole bunch, and then also in freelance kind of stuff, just to make cute little animations. So I have put the link in the description for this robot and also for a background. And as you can see, they got all kinds of cool little sets here. And what you can do is just customize a robot and then animate them yourself. So go ahead and download those assets to a directory on your hard drive, and then let's hop on over into Adobe Illustrator. Now what we'll do in Adobe Illustrator is to open this up, you will just go to File and Open, and then you'll find your robot, which should be labeled 5847 EPS, and just click Open, and then it should bring you to this here. Now before we do anything with that, let's also click File and then New, and I think we should create a new canvas here. We'll call it Bot 1, right? And we'll make sure that it is 2000 pixels by 2000 pixels. And the idea behind that is that our eventual composition in After Effects will be 1080p, which is 1920 by 1080. So this will be bigger than the composition, meaning that we won't be enlarging it and losing any pixel value. It won't be blurry, and it'll look great. So keep it 2000 by 2000 pixels, and then just go ahead and hit create, right? So then that'll give us a blank slate or blank canvas here, as you can see. Go back to the robot, and first of all, gotta say, not a big fan of this head, so we'll just highlight that head and we will click on delete. And I am really digging this face here, so let's just highlight that, drag it on over. Beautiful. And we'll grab that and push that up just a little bit. Alright, and if you push Z on your keyboard, you can zoom in, and yeah, looks great. Alright, so there is some sort of a clipping mask or something. You can see this when you try to click and drag over it. So just go ahead and hit delete on your keyboard and get rid of that. Should enable you to just click and drag over the entire robot in one group. Beautiful. So what we'll be doing is just dragging this entire character up into the other canvas and just dropping him in there. Now if you hold Alt and Shift at the same time, at the same time as you click and drag, you will maintain the correct proportions of the artwork. So go ahead and get him somewhere near the center of the comp. It's not that important. Beautiful. So now we have our shiny happy robot. So let's hit File and Export, and export as. We're just going to do it as a PNG, right? So when you export a PNG without a background, you're going to get this transparency, and that's what we're looking for. So we want to make sure that transparent is selected. The higher the PPI, the better, and click OK. So what that did was just create a PNG with a transparent background. So with that being in mind, let's go ahead and jump back over into After Effects. Alright, so then what we'll do is we will create a new composition by clicking on this window here, the Create a New Composition icon down there. Alright, so the composition name, we were going to call this Robot. And again, we're going to make sure that it is 1920 by 1080 and that the composition duration is set for about 15 seconds, and we can trim that up a little bit later. So click OK, and now we have our blank composition. So you can tell we are not working with any layers at the moment. We can click this little checkerboard thing and show the transparency grid behind. All right, so now to import the robot, you will right-click in this empty space here and click on Import, File, and then just go find your bot.png file and import it. But I've already done that. Got him right here. All right. So additionally, we also I included a link to a background from freepik.com. You can choose this. You can choose any other background or no background at all. That's up to you. All right. So let's go ahead and grab this bot and drag him into the composition. As you can see, he is way bigger than the composition. So click and then hold Shift, and you can drag this down to the appropriate size. So again, we just want him to take up the whole screen there. All right, cool. Now our robot is imported into the scene, and the next thing that we'll do is we will grab this puppet tool up here. As you can see, it's called the Puppet Position Pin tool. You can also hit Control P on your keyboard to enable that. Now, what this is going to do is it's going to put little thumbtacks into the picture. And you can think of it kind of like those old school Halloween decorations that have the little rivets and the elbows and the shoulders, and you could pose them however you want. So that's basically what we're going to be doing with this guy. What we're going to be doing is just adding pins in places that we either want to keep still or that we want to manipulate by moving. So let's go ahead and start off by adding a pin to his hand, because we already know, right? That's what we want him to do. We want him to wave. Let's give him an elbow. Let's give him a shoulder. I think it's best to go ahead and do 2 pins on the shoulder there. All right, and then we'll just repeat the process all the way through the rest of the model. So again, hand, elbow, shoulder. All right, then we want to do a neck. Beautiful. And then we want to do the head. 1, 2, 3, and 4. Next, we want to move to the midsection. Now, you can do this with fewer pins, but I find that this is about the appropriate amount of pins. Basically, like I said, if you don't want something to move, or you do want something to move, best to put a pin in it. And what this is doing is it is creating what's called a mesh. And the mesh, you can see here, has been created on our character. All right, and look at the way that that mesh deforms and forms as we move around those pins. So hitting Control Z, let's undo that. Let's click this button to unshow the mesh real quick. All right, so another thing to talk about with the puppet tool is that when you put pins in things on the timeline, it adds a keyframe. And now what a keyframe is it tells After Effects that at this point in time, I want this thing, in this case, puppet pin number 1, to be right here. Okay? So if we move forward and we move that pin, it makes a new keyframe. So by default, it's telling After Effects, okay, but at this time, which is 7 seconds into the animation, I want that pin to be there. The great thing about After Effects is that it interpolates between keyframes and adds intermediary keyframes for you, or animation for you. So it's not just going to snap from one position to the other. After Effects will create brand new ones in the middle. So basically you tell it at this point in time I want it here, and at that point in time I want it there. You figure out the rest. All right. So again, hitting Control Z. Let's go back to the beginning of the timeline, and with our selection tool selected, let's go ahead and click on the first pin again, which is puppet pin number 1, the hand. Okay. All right. So being that this is the beginning of the animation, we want him to wave about 2 times per second. So he's really happy. He's like, hey guys. So anyway, so what we'll do is we'll start the animation right here. All right. Then we will move forward about 8 frames. 8 frames. And we will drag that puppet pin to a new position. So what we did was this. All right. Now, in order to avoid having to keep doing that and moving it and then moving forward and moving it and moving forward and moving it, what we're going to do is we are going to highlight those 2 keyframes. We're going to hit Control C on our keyboard, and we're going to move forward in the timeline and hit Control V. So what that's doing is duplicating the keyframes to repeat the animation. All right. Same process, highlight, Control C, move forward, Control V. Same process over and over and over until we get through the entire animation. It gets easier because it grows exponentially. So let's see, all the way through to the end of the composition. So right now, if we are to press the space bar on our keyboard, it should play back the animation that we've done so far. And as you can see, he's waving, he's super happy, and that's just going to continue throughout the composition. All right, cool. So the next thing that we want to do is, again, make sure that we are at the beginning of the timeline. And let's go ahead and select the midsection. So another cool thing is that if you click on a pin and then hold Shift, click on another pin and another pin, instead of grabbing 1 pin, you're now grabbing 3 pins. All right, so what we want to do is make his hips kind of gyrate side to side. So those 3 pins are 17, 18, and 19, as you can see. You can tell that again by just clicking on it, and it'll highlight the pin that it is. It can be a little confusing the more complex or more pins that you have in an animation. But so being that those 3 are highlighted, if you push U on your keyboard, it will open up all of the keyframes on the bot here. All right, so we can see that those 3 have set keyframes, and it is starting on this side. Let's move forward. We want his hips to gyrate once per second. Boom, there we go. And just like before, we can see, there they go. We can see that it set 3 new keyframes for that second position. So we'll just highlight those keyframes, hit Control, move forward in the timeline, hit Control V, highlight all, Control C, move forward, Control V, and again, just Control C, move forward, Control V, and highlight them all, Control C, and Control V, and there we go. Now his hips are gyrating, and he's waving. So if we press space bar, we can preview this composition. And the wonderful thing about the puppet tool again is that, yeah, it just enables these really simple sort of animations. But the more you animate each pin, the more character you're giving to your character. All right, so as you can see, he is gyrating the hips. His feet are kind of moving side to side as a result, and he's waving. He's super happy to see us. It looks kind of weird, though, that his arm, his right arm, is just kind of sitting there. So let's go ahead and move back to the beginning of the composition. And let's highlight both of those pins, again, by selecting the pin right there, and then holding Shift and grabbing that second pin. Now we're at the beginning of the composition. Let's move forward with the hips, and we will drag that in. And move the hand in. There we go. So then, let's see what that looks like. That is pin number 5 and 6. Okay. There. So the hand kind of moves along with the hips. All right. So again, just as before, just grab those 2 keyframes, hit Control C, move forward. Again, you want it to go with the hips. So what you can do is hold Shift and scrub along the playhead to the point where the playhead will snap. If you're holding Shift, it'll snap to the next keyframe. That way you're not stuck and accidentally getting out of sync here. So if you hold Shift, it'll snap to the next keyframe there. So we want to create copies of these keyframes, so we'll hit Control C after we highlight them and hit Control V. Highlight them all, Control C. Let's move forward. Forward again. Hit Control V. Beautiful. And just keep on keeping on all the way through the end of the animation. Again, holding Shift and dragging along the playhead. Control V. And there we go. Now, we've got a moving arm, another moving arm, swaying hips, and the feet are even moving a little bit. All right. So that is looking pretty good. Pretty good, pretty good. All right. Now you can add more animation and more pins moving using the same methods that I just showed you. Just depending on what you think is right for the animation that you're doing. So the final couple of steps here are going to be to right-click, import, and go to that industrial background that I also sent the link for. There is a JPEG included in that. And I would suggest just using the JPEG instead of the EPS and going through Illustrator because it's not watermarked. So if you just import 1312 there, I've already done that. So let's go ahead and grab the robot and twirl down the puppet tool and grab 1312 from the project pane window and drag it underneath your bot. As you can see, it's actually pretty big. So again, grab the edge, hold Shift, and scale that down. All right. So let's grab our robot and move him down just a little bit. Now, what you're seeing is that looks pretty cool, but there doesn't seem to be very much difference highlighting the robot. So something we can do to kind of accentuate that is to add a blur between the two layers and simulate kind of a lens blur as if there was a camera going on. So what we'll do is right-click in this empty space, go to New, Adjustment Layer, drag the adjustment layer between the bot and the background. All right. Now with the adjustment layer selected, right-click on it, go to Effect, Blur and Sharpen, and we'll use Fast Box Blur because it's super fast. Click on Repeat Edge Pixels, and that'll prevent the edges from getting messed up. And let's just type 5 in the blur radius. All right, and then what you can see here is that it has put some distance visually between the focus of the robot and the focus of the background. And that is pretty good, pretty good. So now if we just play that back again, he looks like he's where he's supposed to be. Now something else that I did in the other composition was this zoom in effect and the parallax between the robot and the background. So real quick, to achieve that, super easy. All you have to do is, let's lock this adjustment layer. That way we know we're not messing around with it. Let's make these two other layers 3D by clicking on the little cube here and now enabling those cubes, and right click in this empty area, click new camera. Now you want to make it probably 50 millimeters, but experiment. There are lots of cool focal lengths that you can use here, but for today we'll be using the 50 millimeter. Now let's twirl down on the background, go to transform, and let's see. On the position here, if you right click, you can separate dimensions. What this will do is it'll enable you to independently control on each and keyframe also. It's a good habit to have here to just separate those. But it'll let you control in Z space where that background is. Now, if you don't know what Z space is, I'm going to show you real quick here. So as you can see, we created our new camera, right? So this right here is the camera in an imaginary space. Z space would be sort of After Effects 2.5 dimensional 3D. So it's not quite 3D, but it offers a way to create a parallax. And when you move that Z space and increase the Z space distance, what it does is it creates the space between those two layers as far as that camera is concerned. So hopefully that kind of explains what that is here. Now, as you can see in our regular composition, the background appears to be smaller, but let's push that way back. So increase that number quite a bit. And then grab the edge, hold shift, and then just resize that. Make that nice and big. Now, with that taken care of, we've definitely got some space between those two layers, right? So again, highlight the camera, twirl that down to transform, and you see where it says position. Now again, right click, separate those dimensions. This will make it much easier to understand. Z position is the one that we want to operate. So go to the beginning of your composition and click on the stopwatch. And what that does is it creates a keyframe, which tells After Effects I want the camera to see the scene right here, just like this, at this point in time. So then we'll move forward in the scene to about 6 seconds. Well, let's say 5, right? About 5 seconds. And then we will increase this number. And what that will do is it will dolly the camera in. To show you again what's happening exactly, this is our camera. If we go back to the beginning of the shot, and we move forward in time, we see that that camera is moving forward along the Z axis, which is the in and out axis. All right. Okay, so let's see what that looks like here. Let's play that back. If you notice, it sort of snaps and it stops. So it's stopping kind of hard. So to avoid that, what we can do is just highlight those two keyframes and hit F9 on your keyboard. Something else you can do is highlight all the keyframes in your composition as well, or in your robot. If you highlight all of those keyframes, right, and select all of them, and you hit F9, you'll add easy ease to those. And what that'll do is just give your animation more of a fluid motion instead of those keyframes slamming back and forth. It eases and then eases out, and then eases in and eases out. So it gives your animation a much more fluid look. Now, that camera dolly wasn't happening fast enough for me, so let's move that to the 3-second mark, and we'll replay that again. We've got our animation all set and ready to go. Now, there are a lot of other cool, fun things that you can do using Adobe Illustrator and the robot, or any other piece of media and After Effects. For instance, since this piece was all layers, we could isolate the eyebrows and have those winking. We could draw him new eyes and create a blinking effect. The possibilities truly are endless with Adobe Illustrator and After Effects. So thank you so much for checking out this quick tutorial on the Puppet tool, and if you have any questions, please leave them in the comments, and as always, thank you so much for watching this channel. Please subscribe if you want to see more tutorials or you want some more free stuff. I also have the free stock footage for YouTube channel, and I'll link that in the description as well, where you can get a hold of free stock footage. Right now we've got 2 playlists, but those playlists are growing, and again, it's all free footage for you to use in your projects, whatever those might be. So no credit necessary. One more time, I appreciate you guys tuning in. Click that subscribe link and hit that bell for notifications, and we'll see you guys next time.